Hello and welcome to Seasons of Leadership. I'm Dawn Murden, executive coach, mentor, and former VP of Customer Success, and your host today. This is the podcast where we talk honestly about the kind of different seasons that we go through as leaders, the shifts, the challenges, and what those phases kind of teach us along the way. Today, I'm joined by Anika Zubair, a globally recognized customer success leader with 14 years experience scaling CS teams at hypergrowth B2B SaaS companies. She's helped teams deliver over 120% NRR, reduced churn to under 5%, and driven ARR expansion into the tens of millions. Today, as founder and CEO of the Customer Success Pro, Anika helps CS professionals step into their power as revenue-generating leaders through coaching, her content, and her flagship course. Bit excited about this one. Anika, I've been watching you for quite some time, so I'm a bit nervous and ask sort of fit my words a little bit there, but I'm really excited to talk to you as a kind of a fellow CS person. So welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to have this conversation today. I feel honored that you wanted to bring me on as a guest, so I'm really excited to continue this conversation.
Amazing. So glad you're here. So we've both spent a number of years in customer success. Let's start at the beginning for you. What led you into customer success?
I think much like many people who are in customer success right now is it was a happy accident. I wasn't purposely driven into customer success, and my career started probably long before the term customer success manager actually was ever coined. I spent the early part of my career in sales, actually. I was an SDR, and then I moved into an account manager. And funny enough, I was interviewing for an AE role at a different B2B SaaS organization. And in the process of the interview, they told me that based on my skill set and my demeanor and my characteristics that they got to know over the interview process, that I might be better suited for their customer success manager role instead of an AE role. And I was like, okay. I mean, I'm keen to hear more. And yeah, sure enough, I decided to then go down the customer success manager interview process and ended up being a what is probably now known as a digital customer success manager. But I started in sales and then I was interviewing for an AE role. And through that process, they were like, hey, I think you'd be great for a CSM role. Would you want to maybe pursue that? And that's how I accidentally ended up in customer success.
I love that. That really resonates with me actually, because I guess my kind of how I got into customer success was a bit of a happy accident as well. So I was a journalist before that, and then decided to work for a tool that was very much used by journalists. So that was the connection, and started off in training and support. And then we sort of over time were like, we need to do customer success. This is kind of what we're doing, but we need to like mold that function into I guess formal function of customer success, and like I guess kind of call it what it is.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's funny how all our careers are all kind of molded into different directions because everyone I speak to in customer success, very few, unless you're new in your career, have started exactly in customer success. And for a lot of us, even in software, for as long as I've been in software, it was different terminology, but also different roles, different KPIs, but we were all doing post-sales impact or post-sales leadership. And it's wild to see the evolution of it all. And it's also really cool to see everyone starting their career in CS because when I finished university, there was never ever a career choice of customer success. It was either you were sales or marketing was front of house of a business and everyone else was either product, engineering, finance, operations, but there was no actual customer success career path. So I really love seeing how everyone's kind of taken it on board and done it in their own way.
Yeah, definitely. And what do you love about customer success?
I love that we get to help people every single day. I think that it serves a much bigger purpose, and I think sometimes we get caught up in the metrics and the board meetings and the decks and all the things that we have to do, but at the end of the day, I get to really connect with people and actually help them go from A to B using my product or service, and I think that fundamentally is a big reason why I've continued to work in the space and why I continue to grow in my career is I just like to see that transformation happen. And I love that I get to be part of that transformation. So a big part of me continuing to work in CS has been my customers at the end of the day, and working with them and seeing them really get that aha moment where my product and service has been able to like impact them in such a profound way. And a lot of that came from me helping them either onboard, implement, or see continued value. And I really love that. And I continue to love that as well.
Amazing. And tell us a little bit about the Customer Success Pro. Why did you set that up? What are you kind of focused on? What are you doing?
Yeah. So it started during the pandemic, but I just saw this huge gap in the market, honestly, for the ability to enable customer success teams. Now, again, coming from sales and my background in sales, everyone gets training in sales. Honestly, like you're trained until you're blue in the face from it because everyone gets scripts, everyone has sales coaches, everyone is just constantly being enabled and taught how to be a better seller. But I really saw that there was a big gap where even as a customer success leader with a global team of 30 plus people, there was very little time in my day to actually coach, train, and help my team become better at what they do. And of course, I would spend some time doing it, but there was really just this huge gap. And I decided that, okay, through my content, through my podcast, and eventually through the business that I've built, I'm focused on helping customer success professionals really become strategic revenue generating experts and not just task doers or not just people who are the yes person. Because I found that again, there is just very little help when it comes to the customer success side of things to really help people level up and feel confident in their roles. And so that's why it started and that's what it's kind of built into today.
So it's such an interesting point because I know for the Customer Success Collective put out a report. They do one every year, and one of the kind of key takeaways from that was the lack of enablement that you often see in companies. So I think you've really hit on something that's clearly quite topical there, and it seems to be a reoccurring theme that we're seeing in customer success as well.
Yeah, it really is. And I think that it's no shame, by the way. I've been a VP of customer success where I want to help my team. I want to enable them to succeed. And I think every leader does at the end of the day. But when you're trying to serve your most enterprise, high touch customers while also trying to make sure the board is happy, while also trying to grow your team and make sure you're driving impact and revenue, there's just little time in the day to actually help enable your team. And also, there's very little time in the day to build the frameworks that your team need to succeed in their roles. And yes, there can be one framework, but as we all know, there's ever evolving needs of a customer success team. And that ends up falling on a leader's shoulder, which sometimes you just do not have the time in the day. And we're working endless hours to do everything. And it's why I created the courses, it's why I create the workshops that I run. It's mainly to be able to give that space to either individuals or even leaders to help their teams feel like they have the confidence and the skills that they need to be successful as a CSM or a success pro in today's job market and in today's world that we work in.
Definitely. And there's not, so I know from when I was VP of customer success, we did get some training in and things like that. And there's not like you said, there's so many different sales courses out there, but there's actually not a lot of like very specific, CS stuff. And I think sometimes as well, you might be looking at, sometimes there you might be like customer kind of service. There's a lot of customer
Yeah.
service training out there, but it's not customer success. It's very different. So honestly, I that's why I've been watching you for a while. I think what you're doing in that space is brilliant, and I think it's so needed because there is, like you said, a huge gap in the market.
It is. It is. I was at a sales kickoff, but I was training the customer success team. And they specifically said to me, we wanted to bring someone else who's been there, done that in customer success because we're going to be trained by sales leaders all day, which is, by the way, very relevant and very helpful in some cases. But sometimes you just need that little bit of niche specifics, exactly what's happening once a sales closes. And a lot of times in SKOs or in any sort of sales training, you're left wondering, how does this apply to my role? Or how do I take this away and do it for customers that are churning or customers that are upselling? And it's really hard to take that away in a positive way. And I too have literally sat in sales trainings, and my team has been in those sales trainings as well, where they're like, Anika, that was kind of a waste of our day. I would have rather been talking to a customer than going through this training because it just didn't apply to my role. And that's where I see this big gap where we're constantly brought into sales training, which is fine, but it's not always relevant. And that's where I think the friction lies.
I think you've also touched on something that's really important, and it's the communication between sales and customer success as well, and how they work together. Because it's very different, isn't it, in different companies in terms of who has responsibilities and kind of how those two teams are expected to collaborate together. So it's interesting that you're in a kind of sales kickoff doing the CS training. I'd love to see more teams, more sales team, more CS teams doing the respective trainings
Yeah.
together to maybe understand their responsibilities and roles a little bit better. Because I really dislike the narrative of sales and success getting pitted against each other. It just to me seems such a cop out. We know both of the jobs are really difficult, and everyone's just trying
Yeah.
to do their very best. It's sort
Yeah.
of, how do you get people together to understand how they can collaborate in the best possible way using the respective skills of their function, but not kind of being, kind of pitted against each other.
Yeah. And I've seen great teams do that. Exactly. I've worked with another team where I actually trained their sales like leaders and CS leaders in EMEA. And it was great having them all in one room. And they just realized how much of their roles actually cross over and how much they can actually help each other if they're in the same room. But a lot of times, and this is not purposefully, it's not like companies are like trying to create tension between teams, but we're all busy. Sales is
Hmm.
busy, customer success is busy. We're all busy professionals. And sometimes it's just hard to get everyone in a room to understand what each role is doing and how we're trying to drive customer outcomes together. Because at the end of the day, like I can almost guarantee you what sales 99% of the time is trying to drive is what CS is trying to deliver. It's just usually there's this huge gap. And a
Hmm.
lot of it comes from the lack of those two teams communicating to one another, like you just said.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. So let's talk a little bit about CS leadership and tenure. So the average tenure of a VP of customer success is sort of, according to different types of research I've looked at, is approximately around 18 months. In your view, is that enough time for a CS leader to make a real impact?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. I think of my career, I've been in similar stints as well, but a VP of customer success tenure, like you said, is about 18 months. And I think that's super short, actually. And it should be longer, but I don't think that it's enough time to make a lasting impact, but it can be enough to create the right foundations, the right intentions from day one. But is it enough? I don't think it is at all, to be completely honest. But I think we get, coming back to the sales thing that we just talked about, I think we get pitted up against sales leaders. And it's very common for sales leaders to have about 18 months or 2 years of time at a business because sales is measured usually on a quarterly basis, maybe even a monthly basis, depending on your organization and the type of product you are selling. But it's a lot easier to look at 3 quarters or 4 quarters of work, and then suddenly you're seeing the impact of that sales leader. But for CS, at least all the CS leadership roles I've been in and for the teams I've worked with, most people have an annual renewal contract, if not sometimes 2 or 3 years. And if you think about that, if you have a 2 or 3 year contract, 18 months is not enough time to really see the impact of the work you're doing. I mean, in 18 months, you can definitely build trust with key stakeholders, maybe build customer segmentation or like align what exactly is measurable when it comes to retention versus expansion, and maybe even build a few frameworks that work. But the thing is, within 18 months, you're not going to be able to shift the entire organization around the mindset of customer success. And you're not going to be able to actually embed it into the go to market strategy. You're going to need more time to do that, all of that. You can, again, put in the foundations, but I think building the full house, it's going to take some time. And I think that takes momentum and it takes time. And I do not think 18 months is enough time. But unfortunately, again, we're usually pitted up against sales, which is pretty typical to be an 18-month turnover.
It's really interesting because you've got to think of the cycles, like you said, of the renewals and how they sort of come round. What would you say to a CS leader trying to sort of balance that long-term strategy with the quick wins when they're kind of coming into that role?
Yeah, I think it's hard. I really do think it's hard, but I do think that you have to play both games. You do have to think about the short, quick wins because your tenure might not be as long as you're expecting. Um, but you do have to lay foundation for the longer term, as I said earlier as well, because your customers and the way your contracts work aren't short term. So you do have to think in both ways. I think you need to basically pick a quick win that gets you in the door and showing your impact as quickly as possible. I would recommend that you pick wins that are revenue focused or revenue adjacent at least. So like either a renewals playbook or executive alignment, engagement, or even progress of um, product adoption in the first 90 days. All of these things are either revenue adjacent or have direct revenue impact. But then I would also start to think about like, what is your North Star? That's your big, bold move in 12 to 24 months. A lot of customer success leaders, that's probably net revenue retention. It was for me. And you need to really start thinking like, how am I going to make 110 or 120% in NRR actually happen? Because that's not going to happen in 18 months. It might happen a little bit. You might have a little move of the needle towards 120, but that's going to happen quarter after quarter of seeing change happen. So you need to start thinking of what is that North Star metric. And again, I would say recommend to break it down because a lot of times when you're in a new role, you're going to want to do everything and anything to show impact, which is really great. But those quick wins are going to be great, but I think the big win is breaking everything down quarterly. So it's easy for you and your team to really digest what you're trying to do and then build on that. Because even if your tenure is only 18 months or 24 months, at least you're leaving the foundation and the groundwork for them to continue to see success quarter after quarter. But I think a lot of that comes from, again, breaking your mindset into what can you do to easily win some favoritism, let's say, at first, and then what is it that you're building for the long term as well.
I guess it's really interesting as well, isn't it? Because I think that's such good advice. And then I guess the variability of that might then be what kind of organization it is that you're going into, what's the product, what's the service, who are the customers, how big are those contracts, and how long are those renewals? And then also, I guess also what's maybe the problem going in, if what's the problem that you've got to solve. So is it really high churn, is it lack of adoption, is it the sort of no understanding of what the real value or ROI is for the customer. So there's so much, isn't there, for you to understand as a new lead. Like if you're an incoming leader into a company, it's different if you've kind of grown into that VP role, or head of role. But yeah, I think that's really good advice that you can kind of take across, and then you've got to maybe sort of dig down into the company and what the company is kind of struggling with.
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah. And I think a lot of times we come in with this like preconceived notion that we have the right playbooks, the right things to do. But like you just said, you don't know exactly where that company lies. Maybe it's a churn issue, but on the other side, maybe it's actually a retention or renewal problem, or maybe it's actually just product adoption and seeing value as quickly as possible. All three of those things are, yes, tied to customer success, but very different. Um, Playbooks, very different things that you would be doing for each one of those things. And you kind of have to understand that in order to actually build on what is it you're trying to build. Because if you just go in with, okay, I want to hit 120 NRR or we want to get churn below 5%, those were byproducts of me realizing what the company needed at the time. And yes, it was great to have those metrics in my career, but I came in with the hat or the lens of being very curious of what the business was looking to do and also how do I impact growth within customer success? Where does the growth happen? Is it through renewals and upsells or is it because we have a leaky bucket and I need to really fix churn? And I think if you're coming in as a leader, actually, even if you're homegrown, or if you're coming in as a fresh new leader, you do have to take that lens of being quite curious and understanding where is this business going right now? Because again, the business is going to change every quarter, every month, every half year, you name it. Every business is changing dramatically and quite dynamically at the moment. And that change is going to change the playbook or even the strategy that you're building right now in customer success. And I think a lot of this has to be kind of thinking on your toes and working through things with your fellow leaders within the business. But like I said, an adoption problem versus a churn versus a renewal problem. Those are all three different strategies. Are you going to implement all three at once? I mean, you can try, but I'm guessing you're going to probably exhaust yourself and your team. But more realistically, you need to pick your bets and you need to then double down or triple down on those and then start to build out a plan on which strategy you need to focus on.
That's such a good point in terms of, so we were talking about being busy professionals in, either sales or success, kind of going in and thinking, I guess, as a new head of, or you take, like say, homegrown in going into that role. Can you do everything? Probably not. Especially if, the tenure is short as well. What would be your advice to sort of a new CS leader in terms of choosing which one to focus on, like if it's NRR, churn, it's like fixing the leaky bucket? How should they choose what to focus on?
That is such a tough question to answer, but it's a good
Sorry.
one. It's a tough question because I don't know
Yeah.
your business.
Yeah.
I really don't know what your business is trying to do. But I'd say if you've joined a B2B SaaS business in the last few years, I'm gonna guess that they're trying to be profitable. As money is not cheap right now, investment isn't happening as regularly, which means that your business is trying to rely on selling to customers, keeping customers, and hopefully growing customers. And if that is the case, I would really strategically focus on making sure your customers are not just staying, but growing with you. I think that that's probably the direction your CEO wants to take the business anyway. And also because again, the market we find ourselves in and where SaaS is right now at the time of recording this podcast, most businesses are trying to retain and grow their customer base because most companies have hopefully realized by now that it is cheaper to actually keep a customer and grow a customer rather than go and sell and acquire new customers. So that being said, I would say as a CS leader coming in today, I would be focused on identifying growth within customers right now. Of course, maintain as much as you can, unless you have a super, super leaky bucket. Like if you have churn at 30, 40, 50%, of course, you need to address that. But if you have churn at a decent rate, I would say growth is probably the most um, highly relevant part of customer success. That's part of a GTM business right now is making sure your customers are growing with you. So I would be probably pretty focused in that if I was a brand new leader today.
Brilliant. Well, we'll just take a very short break and then we'll come back and talk about CS and sort of working with founders and CEOs. I'm back with Anika, and now we're going to talk about CS leadership and sort of how we work with CEOs and founders. So, Anika, when it comes to CS leadership and working with founders and CEOs, and I feel very negative for starting the questions like this, starting this. But where do you think it kind of tends to go wrong?
Yeah. Um, Great question. As someone who spent the majority of my career in startups and scale-ups, most of the businesses I've been at, for context, have been anywhere from 50 people to less than 400 people. So fairly nimble, small teams. And most all of them were founder led. So the founder was the CEO. And in two of them, I reported to the founder CEO as VP or director of customer success at the time, titles I had. And I think the biggest thing that I've learned in my career, and I think the biggest kind of misalignment that happens, at least with working with founder CEOs, is that there is a misalignment of expectations, and founders often have this preconceived notion of what they think customer success is. And again, they're not totally wrong, but I think when you work with a founder, you're working with their baby, essentially. Like their company or their product or whatever they've built is essentially their child. And when you come in and you want to build this great new customer success proactive program that's going to drive retention and upsells, et cetera, sometimes you have to basically change everything that they've ever built. And sometimes that's like basically telling someone your baby's not as cute as you think it is. In very, very direct words, it's like, your baby's all right, but we could definitely improve what what is happening. And that's sometimes really hard for a founder to digest. And listen, I've worked with founders where they've told me as a CS leader, like, I just want you to keep customers happy. Or suddenly I've literally worked for a founder where they're like, I don't know. I've hired you for that. Like, you're the VP of CS. Like, you make retention magically happen. And I've definitely had founders where they said, like, revenue is a sales job and CS is there to deliver product. Like, I've had all of these scenarios come up in my career, and it's hard because, yes, there is, again, some merit to all those things that some of the founders I've worked with have said, but that is putting us into boxes and almost closing in the possibility of what customer success actually can be. And that's where, again, that misalignment of expectation really, really kind of not breaks, but causes a bit of friction on the trust and the way that you're going to end up actually building customer success within that business. And if no one clarifies what it actually means within that company, things will just start breaking down and it won't actually work. So in working with founders, I think a lot of it just comes to sitting them down and making them really understand that I will build a strategic function, but it's not just me. It requires everyone in the business. Revenue is co-owned, sorry, between sales and myself or my CS team, and also being very clear that you have a seat at the table for decisions that are made across the business, not just with customers. And so a lot of that, again, is just setting expectation and making sure the founder really understands that you're a business leader and not just customer service or someone, like I said earlier, there to keep customers happy.
Yeah, that's so interesting as well in terms of what you touched on there, in that it's everyone's job in the organization. Because I know it's quite a leading question for you there, because we, of course, had a bit of a preamble. No, we wanted to talk about this, but I guess it's not just CEOs and founders, is it? That there's a lot of people in the organization. I think every single function, in my experience anyway, there's definitely been at least one person in every function that kind of still doesn't really understand what CS is there to do or deliver. And it, then that can sometimes lead to kind of things being, sort of, so to speak, being chucked over the fence, and things that we don't understand where things are sort of this function's responsibility. There's a lot of stuff that CS could potentially get kind of dragged into that is, like, not going to make an impact on revenue as well, and is a massive time suck. um and then doesn't, is not there delivering what it should be delivering. So yeah, I thought you just hit on such an interesting point there. Did you sort of have that in your experience as well, in terms of collaborating with other teams across the organization as well?
Yeah, I would say almost in all my roles, working with the sales and marketing leaders was almost like second nature. Working part of a go-to market system was very, like, again, second nature part of everything I was building. Maybe it has to do with the fact that I have a sales background, and it felt natural for me to work closer with sales and marketing as well. But I would say that every organization I've joined, whether I was the most senior executive customer success leader there or not, there was this misalignment, by the way. There is this almost across, again, like I said, whether it's the CEO founder, like you just said, or it's another business leader or another department head or whatever it is, they have this misconception and it's really exhausting. Okay. As someone who
Mm.
spent 14 years in SaaS now, I just find it extremely exhausting that every organization I join, it's almost like I have to retrain the internal teams exactly what customer success does. Then I have to train my customers on what we are doing and shaping and working on together. And then it's the board or like the execs or whoever else is above me. It's almost constant hamster wheel that you're on where you're trying to shape what is customer success and what it means in a business. And I do hope if I could look into a magic ball and think about the future of customer success, I hope in 10 years time, if I'm still doing podcasts, I can say that companies get it, because there are some things that companies do get now, which is awesome to see the shift and the change over the last 14 years. But like you just said, there are people within the business that just don't get it. A big part of being a business leader and a big part of being able to be a go-to market leader is explaining within the business. I've had to explain to plenty of sales teams, plenty of marketing teams, plenty of product teams, this is what we do. and this is how we're going to do it, and this is how we're going to work together. But there's a lot of assumption that happens within most SaaS businesses or businesses in general, actually. And these assumptions leave us all frustrated with one another. They leave us saying, oh, well, that should have been done by sales, or why didn't the product team do this, or engineering left this out, or whatever it is. And at the end of the day, by the way, a customer is never going to say it's the engineering team's fault or it's the sales team's fault. They're going to say it's your company and your product's fault. And that is everyone in the business's problem to deal with. And so I think a lot of customer success leadership, see it as fortunate or unfortunate, however you might want to see it, is thought leadership within your own business. You do have to almost have a leadership mindset that goes in to help educate your wider organization around exactly what it is CS is. And even better, by the way, if you can let them know what CS is not. Because
Mm,
again, I think that's what happens when we start throwing everything to CS, is because people don't realize that's not my job. We say this is my job, but they don't realize what isn't our job.
yeah. 100% agree. And that misalignment, where do you think that misalignment sort of comes from? It's,
Hmm.
is it like the GTM systems? Is it like the leadership mindset? Is it kind of structural flaws? What would you say is kind of responsible for that misalignment?
I mean, there's two things I can answer that question with. One is I do think it starts with leadership. It starts from the top down. It starts from leading by example. It starts from the company knowing their fundamental values of how they value customer success. And then that trickles down to everyone else. So honestly, being a strong customer success leader, being a part of a strong executive team will only lead to the wider company really understanding what customer success does. But I'll take it to a more macro, bigger level here is, again, I lean in onto my sales experience, but if you think about sales and marketing, it has been around since the dawn of time, by the way. Like sales, or let's even start with marketing. Marketing has a funnel. There's a top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, and then the conversion of that funnel, right? And sales works into that funnel. And then they have even like Medic or MedPick or Bant or any of these other frameworks that sales leaders all use. Sales and marketing almost have a rough idea of exactly what they do in every organization. And I hate saying this, but it kind of is the truth. But in customer success, it all depends on what organization you're part of that is going to define the customer success motion that you're building out. Because, like we talked about earlier, maybe you're focused on retention, or maybe it's actually an upsell strategy that you're building. Those are two different strategies, and they're going to have two different playbooks, and they're going to be very different depending on what organization and product you're trying to deliver for. And I think customer success is just in its infancy. Okay, maybe we're toddlers by now, but we're still very young in
Mm,
comparison to the way you think sales and marketing is. Sales and marketing, you've always had to sell products. And yes, you've had to market to people to even get them in the door. So in that way, I'm very jealous that sales and marketing have these established ways of working. And again, the whole business almost gets it. Okay, marketing works on branding, marketing works on lead funnels, marketing works on how our website is looking, etc. Sales works on closing those customers and bringing them in and getting good case studies, etc. Whatever it is, it's almost understood from a sales and marketing perspective. But I just think customer success is still early in its entire evolution in the go-to-market sphere, that we are still defining that. And as we get more people in the door, as more people work in customer success, as more companies adopt a customer success mindset, I think then and only then will we truly see it part of a strategic function within the go-to-market. But right now, like I said earlier, I think as a CS leader, you do have to come in and you have to be the internal thought leader on what exactly customer success is doing within the business at the time, because it's just not defined yet. We just do not have that definition as sales and marketing do right now, and I hope we'll get there someday. But right now, I think that that's a big gap that we do have.
yeah, I agree with that. And so I think we see that in sort of all the research that comes out about CS, and so there's so much variability in the way that it's described, and also, just even down to the responsibilities that CS teams have in different organizations as well at different times. And there's a lot in terms of, I guess, the way CS works will depend on what the sales team looks like and what the marketing. There's quite a lot of reliability, I guess, across the different functions as well.
Mm.
So I think you're totally right. That kind of definition is going to be slightly different for each CS function within an organization, and it's the leader's responsibility to define that to the organization in a really articulate way and re-educate about that, even if it is frustrating.
It is. And I hope that everyone listening doesn't feel alone, by the way. As much as I just
Yeah.
said sales and marketing are defined, by the way,
Mm.
like I've come into organizations where I've been told we need to use Medic. And I'd never used Medic before. And so that's something that's, again, a leader is defining that framework and strategy for that specific sales team in that specific organization. So you're not alone. And I feel like a lot of
Mm.
times in customer success, we feel very alone, that we've got to do it all ourselves. And it's the number one thing I hear from customer success professionals as I work with them is like, oh, I'm so glad that someone else is going through this with me. I can guarantee there's at least a dozen, if not 100 people feeling the same exact feeling you're feeling. But the reality is it is the work that we do have to put in. And I'm guessing your sales and marketing team, to a different degree, have to do similar things as well. So you're not alone, is my little takeaway for anyone who is listening and feeling like, oh, I have to do more work than my sales or marketing people. Yes, maybe, but they're also putting in work in different ways too.
Yeah, exactly. And you talked about that earlier in terms of just kind of like getting everyone on the same page in the same room. You're all working on the same things. You want the same outcomes, but it's just kind of how do you get, I guess, singing, old adage, but singing from the same hymn sheet and realizing we are all working on the same thing, just maybe talking about it in a slightly different way.
Hmm. For sure, for sure. And my biggest tip on that, by the way, and I know that we all work in hybrid remote worlds, is getting everyone in a room. And I know that's expensive. I know it's costly. I know it's time consumption that we would all rather be doing our day jobs or whatever you want to say. But a lot of times I have had quarterly alignments between sales and marketing in one room, and it's cleared up a lot of chaos because suddenly we were like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. Or actually, maybe we shouldn't focus on that because it doesn't make sense to hit our KPIs this quarter. But yeah, I think a lot of times we just misjudge and misalign to our counterparts. And then we're constantly feeling like we're the victim of things where sales has just given us a bad deal, or marketing should have never qualified that lead, or product should have never delivered the product in that state. Yeah, okay, but it's happened. And now we can probably talk about the best way to resolve it or not do it again, for example. But if we don't get in a room and have that conversation, the mistake is probably going to happen again. And then you're just going to be left more and more frustrated.
I know in coaching we talked about the drama triangle and like victims, heroes. It's like how do you take yourself out of that drama triangle? This has
Yeah.
happened. Let's just be rational about it. How do we move on and sort of do the best going forward for the customers and for the company?
Exactly. Exactly. And at the end of the day, if ever you feel unclear about it, your customers are looking at your company as a whole. Your product is a whole thing. So whether they're speaking to the product manager, the sales manager, or the CSM, they see one product. They see one tool, and they doesn't matter who they speak to, that you are the company. You're representing the company that's the logo that's there, and that's all they care about at the end of the day.
Let's talk about a little bit about metrics. So we've talked a little bit about NRR and also churn as well. What metric should we really be concentrating on in CS?
I love this question because it's evolved over the years. And I really, really hope that everyone who's listening is probably feeling that our metrics need to revolve more around revenue. And even if you say sales owns revenue, or in my organization, we don't own revenue, you do. Even if you influence an upsell and pass it to sales, that's still a revenue metric, by the way. So I would say the most effective metrics, or the most highly impact metrics that matter right now in businesses, are probably in three buckets. One is like value realization. So like helping customers achieve their goals. Now, how you define that, again, you know your business best, but I personally use like time to value, or percentage of customers that have given goals and then those goals have been achieved as well. So like value delivered versus value promised kind of thing. And then the second bucket is more around revenue influence. So like, again, net revenue retention, we kind of already talked about that. Are you actually influencing an upsell and closing an upsell? Or are you even influencing and creating opportunities for upsells that get passed on to sales? Are you actually forecasting renewals and expansions? These are all revenue influence that I think are really important metrics to track. And then the final piece, which is maybe a little bit trickier to track, but it's around strategic engagement. And I do think that this is something that's probably underrated because we like to tick boxes or get things done in customer success, but ticking boxes doesn't necessarily build strategic alignment with your customer and doesn't necessarily build long-term growth. So I would also look at how many of your customers have you multi-threaded? Do you have the right champion and executive buyer in contact? How many engagements have you had with the executives? How often? How deep? I've heard so many times that executives never even show up to any calls anymore. I would say that's a pretty red account if your executives are no longer, your executive buyer doesn't even care to come to one call per year. That's a problem. Um,
Mm.
and then again, strategically tracking success plans and making sure that your customer is on track. And again, these are more like soft metrics that impact revenue and long-term growth, but they're still really important metrics. So ultimately, CS isn't a delivery function, which we kind of cleared up at the end, at the very start of this podcast. It is a growth function. So if I were to really consider metrics right now, and if you're really focused on growth, it's growth metrics that matter based on your customer outcomes deliver that then result in commercial results for your business. So making sure your customer is growing and using your product correctly, but that results in a renewal or an upsell. Those are kind of the metrics that come to mind that are super important to focus on.
Mm. And that goes sort of, back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of like tenure as well and being able to show that impact, because oftentimes, like we said, you're waiting for that renewal cycle to come back round. So there's going to be that foundation laying there, which is going to be the success plans and talking to the right people, building those relationships, etc. And then you've got the more kind of metric driven stuff, which it depends, I guess, how the renewals work in the company and when the upsell comes, if it's phased into the upcoming renewal, if it becomes before that, how that works as well. But I just think that goes back to what you were saying earlier as well, in terms of how a CS leader can make the biggest impact by sort of looking at those metrics. Because I guess we always talk about churn and NRR and sort of the kind of this, I guess, in the cycles. But what you're talking about there is just, it feels like you're digging a little bit deeper into those metrics that we often talk about and actually uncovering more of a narrative around them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're always going to have a North Star metric. And I think it's important to have a North Star metric. And for most businesses, that's probably GRR, as we already discussed. But there are a lot of supplementary metrics out there that are going to help you reach that goal. Also, FYI, GRR and NRR are lagging metrics. They're only measured after the fact, right? They're measured
Yeah.
after a customer has churned or after a renewal has gone through. What are your leading metrics that are actually going to help you decide if 120 NRR is going to happen? It's not just tracking the last year of renewals, because we know, looking back, yes, maybe there's some forecast, but it's not always accurate. The year might change, your product might change, your customers might change, and all of that might result in a different NRR or GRR this year than last year. But like I said earlier, maybe it's time to value. Maybe it's actually tracking what was promised in sales cycle and what was actually delivered in the customer success world. Or maybe it's how much of the product, that if you're a consumption-based product, how much of the product is your customer actually using? And if they have customers dropping off or not using it after a certain amount of time, or users, sorry. But I think in general, there are supplementary metrics that are, like I said, either revenue focused, revenue adjacent, that need to be focused on, because as we evolve in customer success and as customer success becomes a growth engine that it's always meant to be, NRR and GRR are very much lagging metrics. They're not, I, I could not forecast that for you. I can give you an estimate, but it wouldn't be an accurate forecast. So it's how am I looking at the current data that I have to be able to give you an accurate forecast of the overall state of our customers in our business right now, which is, again, GR and NR can only look backwards. It cannot look forward. So that's my other tip, is if you are tracking any metrics, try to balance a bit of forward-looking forecasting with NRR and GR, which is always looking back to the last quarter or the last year.
Exactly. You can't change the past. You can only impact the future.
Exactly.
Let's talk a little bit about CS and kind of career transitions and also burnout. Burnout gets talked about a lot in conjunction with CS. Like we said, I mean, there's lots of demanding careers out there, but it does feel like there's a lot of rhetoric about CS being particularly demanding. There's maybe quite a few people dropping out of the career at the moment, or so it seems. If you kind of live in the echo chamber that is LinkedIn and sort of see all of that stuff coming through. What would you say to someone who is thinking of leaving the CS world because, maybe they're feeling a bit frustrated, like we said, exhausted, they're not getting that enablement that we talked about? What would you kind of say to them?
It's tough out there. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Whether you're in CS or not, I think SaaS has become a very different world than when I entered it. And I don't think that the world we live in is going to change it for necessarily easier, if I'm honest. I think it just, unfortunately, the world we live in gets tougher and tougher. And that's just me being real and honest and raw. I think there's lots of changes coming on the horizon that will help CS professionals, AI being a big one. I know a lot of people are scared about it, but I do think that as you learn to adopt and work with it, it can be a huge co-pilot to the work that you do every single day. So it's not going to replace the human at all. At all, at all, at all. We're all exhausted, by the way, with AI giving us auto generated crap all over the internet. Um,
Yeah.
so if you think about it that way, your customer is not going to want AI generated stuff all the time. They're going to want human. But coming back to your point of just all the work that a CSM has to do, listen, CS professionals are heroes. They are literally the unsung heroes of SaaS. I say it all the time, but it gets lonely. And I think a lot of times we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to deliver and to not let the customer churn and to make sure they grow and exceed expectations, et cetera. But I think if you are on the cusp of really questioning is CS for me or not, I think it comes back to really, why did you get into it? I know the question you asked
Mm.
me, like, why did I start in customer success? I would encourage people to ask that question to themselves and say, why am I in this? Is it because I want to climb a career ladder? I want to get as much money as possible, all these things. Like, then yes, CS can be an option, but there's plenty of other jobs out there that can also give you those same exact things. But if you really want to help people, if you really want to be able to transform how a business is working with software, then CS is probably for you. But I would probably recommend a few things. One being ask for help, whether that's from a colleague that's working in a similar role, whether it's a product manager, a marketing manager, someone that's similar to the role you're in, ask them to help with the customer because a lot of times, again, we feel like we have to do all these customer calls alone. I've had customer calls where I've had more people on our side, meaning my company, than the customer on a call. Cause I'm like, I don't have marketing answers. I don't have product answers, but I'm going to have both of them join this call because I can't do it alone. So I guess my first tip is like, you don't have to do it alone. I think a lot of times we think we have to do it alone and that can only lead to more work for ourselves. So please do not do it alone is my first tip. And the next thing is if you're feeling like it's really too much, and you can't seek help internally, whether it's your manager or like I said, people who are your colleagues who work in similar roles, I have personally built out my own network, and I reach out to them all the time. All the time. Like, I remember I built out the network that I built out in London when I first moved here because I was in my first leadership role in 2015, and there was very few CS leaders at the time, and very few CS leaders I knew because I had just moved here. And I decided to just expand my network. And these are some of the people that I consider friends today. And I can easily text them and be like, hey, I had this happen. Have you had something similar happen to you? And having that ability to have a close network that I can really rely on and text and just know that they're there for me is reassuring as well. So I guess that comes back to, again, not being alone, but you need to really decide, is customer success something that gives you a passion and it excites you, and take the work out of it, take all the admin out of it, because I think that's going to
Mm.
change with AI. And if it still excites you, then ask for help. That's my biggest tip. And if it doesn't excite you or if you have other goals, there's a huge wide world of other opportunities as well. It doesn't have to live and die with CS. I know that a lot of people have started their careers in customer success now, and you might feel like I have to climb this career ladder and stay in customer success. No, you don't. I started in sales. If you asked me 15 years ago, I wanted to be an AE and a VP of sales. I didn't want to work in customer success, it didn't even exist. So 15 years from now, your career might look very different because there might be a whole new category that you might be pursuing. So it doesn't have to be in customer success. But my biggest tip is you're not alone, and do reach out for help wherever you need it.
I think that's absolutely amazing advice. And Anika, honestly, I could continue this conversation for a long while because I've really enjoyed chatting with you, but we're almost out of time. um, so, thank you so much for sharing your insights today. I think there's so much there that the listeners can kind of take away. Um, if you could highlight maybe like one key thing from today, is there anything that you would say or like reiterate to listeners?
So many things I could probably say, but I think that in general, your career doesn't have to be perfect, and it's probably going to be way messier and way more downs than ups. And even though you might see someone with lots of highs and career trajectory and all these amazing things that they've done in their career, know that your career is on the right path that it should be at this exact moment in time. And in customer success, you really don't have to do it alone. I think that that's probably one of the biggest learnings I've had in my career is I can't do it alone. And you shouldn't have to either as a CS professional. So I hope that helps anyone that's listening.
And if anyone would like to kind of contact you or follow you after today, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn at Anika Zubair or thecustomersuccesspro.com. I'm also on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube under that handle. So feel free to reach out. I love, by the way, having conversations after the fact. So feel free to message me.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much today. And thank you to everyone listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do share it with someone that's perhaps ready to grow into their next season, or someone that's just passionate about CS, or they're currently working CS and maybe they're feeling a bit frustrated. But take care for now, and we'll hope to see you again soon. Thanks. Bye.